Hello, you're very welcome back to episode 24 of the S Gilmore Story. And another example of how this man's story and the history of America seems to weave in and out of each other. You might wonder, why are you looking at a picture on the screen there of a cow and so on? Well, I'll tell you. This is one of those occasions when I started this all off, I didn't know the first thing about this particular story. However, I had heard of various things referenced on television and so on, like our sports, the Chicago Fire or Chicago Flames or whatever, and every so often that term, and I just thought that was a very fanciful term at the time. I didn't know its history, and I didn't definitely know that there was any link with Gilmore, so we're going to explore that today. Here we have, I suppose, a cartoon, a lithograph from 1871. And it shows a picture of this lady. Her name is Catherine O'Leary, and she's milking her cow in her barn. And the cow kicks over a lamp and it sets the hay on fire. The hay burns, the barn burns, and a lot of Chicago burns. And this happened in October the 8th of 1871. And the fire went on from the 8th of October till the 10th of October. And over 300 people died in that fire. 300 people. The total assessed damages for the fire were over 200 million. 200 million. In today's money, about 4 billion is one estimate. But some nice parts to this story would include Chicago City Fire Department today have their training depot built on the site of the actual barn, which is one great thing. And also in 1997, Chicago City Council exonerated poor Mrs. O'Leary for any blame, or her cow for that matter, for the fire. She unfortunately died in 1895 and she was hounded for the rest of her life, but I might get back to that later. Now, the story of the fire is interesting because it happened in Chicago in a time when all of America as such, most of America was built from lumber. Bricks and mortar were a lot more expensive and obviously not accessible. Here's an example of Chicago after the fire, and you might be able to see the outlines of gables of houses or whatever it is, of buildings, and it was pretty devastating. The only thing that was left was bricks and mortar, if anything at all. And here you've either got a railroad or a canal. Again, that's all that's left. By 1893, 22 years after the fire, Chicago had rebuilt Chicago itself. It was open for business, but really this was Chicago open for business to the world. This was the World Exhibition, or as it was known then as the Great Columbian Exposition, and very ornate type buildings and so on. But it showed that Chicago had recovered completely. But these are some other photographs of the gables of houses and what little was left afterwards. This is the huge extent of the fire, bordering on the actual lake itself. So it really was a huge area. 300 people dead, 200 million in dollar damages. So Chicago decided, look, we're going to have to do something about this. We're going to have to rebuild and so on. And one of the options that they had as people, as cities have today, is when they're redeveloping an urban area, they look to see if they have an international airport, could they redevelop it as an international hub. Similarly, Chicago decided they were going to develop the railroad as a hub for passenger travel, and as the main gateway to the west, and also for the cattle drives and for the stockyards, the famous stockyards in Chicago. And so this was basically the plan, and to rebuild all of this area, hotels, businesses, homes, and so on, and make it fireproof. And by doing it this way, they were basically putting in place a plan, a strategy, and they estimated that it would take about 2 years to redevelop. And the person that they contracted to reopen the place, to reopen the city, was S Gilmore himself. And he was going to take care of organizing the actual, what they called the Chicago Jubilee, the Rebuilding Festival. And this would take place in a depot, a passenger depot that was going to be built as part of the actual railroad structure in Chicago itself, and basically attract customers from all over the neighboring states and so on and so forth. I should also mention that when the place burned, the cities in the country were absolutely wonderful in terms of their support. For instance, New York city donated about 400,000, phenomenal sum of money. St. Louis, 300,000. London, England, £8,000, including private donations. Cincinnati, Boston, Cleveland, Buffalo, and other cities. And by the way, these cities were also rivals of Chicago, looking for the same business. But when Chicago was needing, they were there. And it was wonderful to see. There was stories like the wonderfully luxurious Palmer House Hotel. It had only been opened 13 days before the fire, and it was burned to the ground. So basically, that was the background to the fire itself. Now, back to S Gilmore himself. The fire takes place in 1871. For the next basically 2 years, they're building and reconstruction and so on. But from Gilmore's point of view, Gilmore had finished the Peace Jubilee in 1869. He had also decided by 1871, he had written a history of the Peace Jubilee. I showed you that in the previous episode. And he had outlined a rough idea of a plan that he had for another Jubilee, which would be held later on in Boston. And that Peace Jubilee was to develop the music of America, not just his band, but the music of America, onto another level. We don't know the details at that stage because the details only become evident later on. But that event would become, would be developed and would, if you like, become evident in 1872. In fact, just before this event here in 1873, when Gilmore would reopen Chicago. So for the sake of the actual story itself, I'm continuing with the story so you understand. 1869 National Peace Jubilee, 1871 the fire, 1871 the book, the history book, 1872 the next Jubilee, and 1873 the Chicago Jubilee. So now that we've got that all sorted, the event started in June of 1873. P.S. Gilmore made the 1,200 mile trip from to Chicago from Boston with his close friend and business partner, and they arrived to basically review the scene and where they actually would be playing. Gilmore wasn't too happy with the actual premises because, as I said, this was exactly where he would be playing. In the, I'm just reading here, New Chicago, the Jubilee week in celebration of the reconstruction of the city, the grand concert in the depot of the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railway. And here, within this huge building, which would have been a passenger terminal, Gilmore would play. That's the site of his choir and orchestra. Seated in front were 15,000 people, and standing, in addition, were another 25,000 people. The heat was sweltering, and you look at ladies standing round in petticoats and men with cravats and Victorian type dress and so on. They must have been really uncomfortable. But there was 40,000 each day for 3 days. There was no question about it. Everyone was delighted that the event was taking place. According to the Chicago Tribune, Chicago was filling up with visitors. Gilmore, the hero, was now being compared to his namesake in Irish history, the hero of Limerick, Patrick Sarsfield Gilmore. He was been welcomed by leaders, governors, politicians, business leaders, and so on and so forth, as the hero of the hour. It was quite incredible. The main attraction in Boston, again according to the Tribune, was the Jubilee. Around noon, the people started wandering towards the depot to reserve seats for the wonderful Gilmore. The number of visitors was difficult to estimate. Each day, 84 trains arrived to the city. Each train had 10 to 16 cars, uncomfortably crowded with visitors. People who lived within 10 to 20 miles preferred their own transport. And so the place was absolutely, as we would say, packed. Gilmore had put in place an organisation which would include 160 musicians, far smaller than the Peace Jubilee in Boston. Mainly because Gilmore was trying to develop an organisation that could compare with the Europeans, more so than just develop loud music. In addition to that, the choir again was less, 200 sopranos, 125 altos, 200 tenors and 200 basses, a not inconsiderable choir. The sopranos were dominant in each piece. And to give you an idea of the performance, for instance, the first day, New Chicago Hymn of Praise, followed by Festival Overture, followed by Angel of Peace, the chorus, The Heavens Are Telling, solo for cornet, obviously played by Matthew Arbuckle, Star Spangled Banner, William Tell Overture, See the Conquering Hero Comes, Anvil Chorus, and of course, Near Are My God to Thee. And so, sweltering though it was, that roof there, corrugated iron, all of those vents on both sides were open, and young lads and maybe not so young lads climbed up there and sat on the hot tin roof looking in at and listening to the music of Gilmore and the band. It was a wonderful occasion, and Chicago was now reopened for business. As I said, a wonderful success and a story like many that no one ever knew of before. And by the way, that's a page straight out of Frank Leslie's illustrated news from 1873. So I hope you've enjoyed that particular story, and look forward to seeing you for the next episode, episode 25. Please click like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you the next week. So bye bye.